Well, here we are. This is part two of where it all began for my family and a lot of my most amazing experiences. And we're standing in Little Valley up at our branding corrals that's now owned by the Crum family. And they were so gracious to allow us to come up here and create some footage and tell stories. And we've had a multi-generational relationship with the Crum family. And I'm so happy that they're the people that have this special place, in my family's history, because they continue on with that legacy of a multifamily generational business and horses and cattle and all the things that were near and dear to my family's heart at that stage of the game before we transitioned over to, production, agricultural type activities. One of the first dates I had with my wife was to drive up here because I really needed to connect with my grandfather, who was my hero in my life. And coming up here and smelling the dirt, there's something about the dirt in this branding corral that instantly takes me back to all the amazing experiences I had with my grandparents and my parents. And so first thing I got to do is, as promised, I got to go smell the dirt. And so you'll notice that I did some digging because the dirt on top is fresh dirt, right? That's new dirt. I need to get down here, down below the surface, to some of the dirt that was probably been covered up with new memories and new experiences, and get down to the dirt that was, in my mind, representative of my grandparents and great grandparents. And man. And I smell a lot of dirt. I'm a farmer, but there's something really special about this dirt. It instantly, it's amazing how senses instantly take you back in time and recreate everything. I feel like I'm standing here in these corrals. My grandparents are alive. My parents are here. All the old cowboys that were part of it, Roy Kinnear, Boss Hawkins, Babe Hawkins, Tuffy Hamilton, all the people that were constantly here all the time coming together. And I was reminded by somebody that's on our team right now on the farm of what's so special about being in the cattle business and branding. And he reminded me of this as something he wants to go on. So this is a tribute to, testament to Cody Shepard understanding, what this is really all about. And he said, what's great about branding is he goes, all your neighbors who are super busy stop and they bring all their resources and all their knowledge and all their skills, and they come to your place for free and they work their butt off and help you brand cattle. And that's exactly what happened here too, is that I didn't ever think about it when I was 6, 8, 10 years old when I was here. But it's true. All these people came from all over the place, came in. Grandma ended up cooking for everybody at noon, and we all got together. And likewise, when it was their turn to brand, we'd go to other spots. And that's why rural America, and that's why agriculture really is something that needs to be protected, needs to be sacred, not just from a national security standpoint from food sourcing, but from the standpoint of helping your neighbors, taking care of your neighbors, having your neighbors' backs. And it's a very special thing. So I really appreciate Cody reminding me of that, because that's exactly what happened here, and something I was really, really enjoyed. So the next thing I want to do is walk over to where I probably lost more blood, had more cuts and bruises and stitches and all the above. Was that my first goal was to impress my grandfather enough to get what I considered to be a man's job or an adult job. And the first one that I potentially was qualified for was bringing the calves up in the chute, right? And so at this point, I'm probably somewhere in that 7 to 8 year old range, probably weigh about 60 pounds. And, the average calf is, 60 to 120 pounds. And so I was at a significant disadvantage. But the real key to the story here is that when you're young, you have a hard time staying focused for long periods of time. And the great thing about being around horses and cattle is that when you don't show respect and you don't pay attention, there's a price to pay, right? And in this case, we're going to walk over the chute and talk about some of the prices to pay and some of the great memories I had. So in here, there'd be about 20-ish calves at my body weight or up to twice my body weight. And the goal was to push them down this chute. So the story on this particular circumstance was I'd finally earned my right to have an adult job, which was never let that working chute be empty. So when my grandfather and dad and all the other people that are up there working, when they were finishing with a calf, it was my job not to get, because if you get them up there too soon, then they start getting restless and they want to turn around and come back on you, right? And so you don't want to be having them up there too far, but by the same token, you don't want the people up in the front of the chute that have a lot of responsibility and a lot of animals to process waiting on you, or in this case, they'll replace this child with an adult to get the job done. So I'm back here and had been doing this for 2 or 3 hours. And there's some real common rules that come with, handling calves in this kind of a circumstance. And the one thing is you don't want to give them space to do two things. One is kick you, and two is to spin around and run you over. And so since I, like I said, was young and had not really been really good at keeping concentration and focus and my discipline for long periods of time, this is where I learned a lot of that. And so in this circumstance, it was my turn to bring another big calf up the chute. And because I was kind of tired and kind of not really paying attention, I gave the calf too much space. And he did both of what I just explained to you, which was about, 10 feet in front of me. I'd given the calf 2 or 3 feet of space, which is plenty to really kick you hard. And I got kicked really hard. And then when I got kicked hard, I went down, and then the calf spins around in the chute and runs over the top of me. So now I'm covered in dirt and manure, a little bit of blood, shins hurting. But more importantly, I was embarrassed because I was trying so hard to prove to my grandfather and father at this time that I deserved this responsibility. And why I love standing in this chute is because I can remember it like it was yesterday. I'm literally standing in the spot where I'm standing up, I'm dusting myself off, I'm crying, but crying more from embarrassment, not from pain, not that it didn't hurt. And my grandpa stuck his head into that chute about 30 plus feet away from me and just looks at me and says, "Do I need to send a man back there to do that job?" And I'm crying, I'm frustrated, I'm embarrassed. And I'm like, no and hell no, right? I've wanted this job, I say my whole life, but when you're 6 or 8 years old, your whole life isn't that long of a time frame, but it's still relevant, relatively speaking. And so I got back up, got there and got that calf back up that chute. And literally anytime I face tough circumstances in life, one of the things that crosses my mind is this visual right here of my grandfather looking down and 30 feet away from me, just not asking if I was okay, not asking if I was hurt, wasn't asking, do I need bubble wrap or a pillow, right? He was simply just like, do I need to send a man back there? Which is basically pull yourself up by your boots when you're having a tough moment, right? And stand up and face that adversity and go back at it again and go back at it hard. And it's amazing how quickly the pain from the calf kicking me and the blood and whatever else, all that stuff went away as soon as I got the courage up and got that calf back down the chute. So this is a super special spot. We're going to move to another special spot because this area right here, I could tell stories for days because I have a lifetime of memories here. But the calf chute was the first one. So now we're going to work our way up to where we used to separate the calves from the cattle. And my second goal was to develop my horsemanship skills to where I could have what I thought was one of the next, if not the best job or most honorable jobs, which was you were good enough with control of your horse and your decision making and your abilities that you could efficiently, without getting the cattle riled up and without having a bunch of cattle get by you and having to, bring them back around and clean things up, separating the calves from the cows, because the calves were intended to stay in this slightly larger pen to ultimately feed the pen that we were just standing in. And so somewhere about the time I was 11 to 12 years old, my grandpa finally gave me the opportunity with my horse to work this gate. And literally at that stage of my life, it was literally the most significant accomplishment that I could imagine. I couldn't imagine anything greater than being given the responsibility, because you got to remember all the people that were here were my grandparents' age. They were 2 generations older than me. People had knowledge and experience that to this day I still don't have the equivalent of. And so to have this, like I said, I realized that all those forefathers, so to speak, were watching me. And I enjoyed the pressure, I enjoyed the responsibility, but this was my favorite job, was when it came time to separate animals, that I got to stand, sit in the gate with my horse and let my horse do what it was trained to do. And I don't know, it just, standing here is just awesome. And as I look out this direction, I see the scale where my grandma used to sit with a table and weigh all the animals that were going to go on a truck. It's still the same scale here. I sat here with my grandma at her table and she weighed the cattle coming through here, going onto a thing. This is also one of the spots where my grandmother would do all the photographing of all the registration processes for my grandfather's Shugbar quarter horse line. I got to help her with all that kind of stuff. And I can literally see that 69 Dodge Charger, gray with a white vinyl top, coming in right before lunchtime. And somehow in this Dodge Charger, she was able to feed 15-ish people here out in the middle of nowhere, coming in a Dodge Charger that was also full of tools and stuff. That's part of the earlier part of the story back in camp where my great-grandfather settled. And you have already heard that story at this point in time. One of my favorite stories to tell is that during the summertime, we had a community swimming pool down at Pit 1. And that's where traditionally most people would go to get swimming lessons and learn to swim if you didn't already spend a lot of time on a lake or a river. But it was also the same opportunity for me to spend unlimited time, with my grandfather horseback. And I'm proud to say I don't know how to swim, right? And I would make that same decision over again today. For me, it was like go to swimming lessons or be horseback with my grandfather, no brainer. And so that's why I can look on every single square inch of every single hill I can see as far as I can going, I've either been horseback by myself or horseback with my grandfather or my dad or some of our colleagues or some of those great people that used to come up and help us work cattle. And it's just special to look here and just have a memory on every square inch of everything you can see. And one other thing I really want to share is there was another special person in my life that wasn't a family member, but really functioned as a family member, which was a gentleman named Lee Hines. Lee Hines owned the local little bar in town and a little restaurant in Little Valley. And anytime my grandfather was too busy to take me out hunting or fishing, Lee was always available. I would walk about 30 minutes up the hill to Upper Camp, knock on Lee's door unannounced, and Lee never told me no one time. He was always like, I'll be ready to go, Trav. Give me 20, 30 minutes. And we get in his old white Chevy step-side pickup. And back here in this dry, rocky area that you can see behind me was one of the greatest prairie dog shooting areas that I'd ever experienced in this area. And Lee would come up there and sit with me for hours. If I wanted to shoot for 4 hours, he'd say nothing, right? He'd have probably, I'm guessing, a cigarette, probably some form of alcohol, whether it be beer or a flask of whiskey or something. And he'd just sit there and let me shoot until my heart was content. Or he'd take me up to the reservoir that you can see off this way and let me fish. And so I was really blessed to have kind of a surrogate grandfather, right? When my grandfather or grandmother wasn't available. And, the reason that in this part of the story, my parents aren't a huge part of this story is, my mom's trying to raise 3 kids, 20 miles from town and, starting to try and run a business. And my dad's working full-time running a farm. So once again, another plug for why rural lifestyle and rural living and agriculture is such a big deal is because having the multi-generational family component together, which is something that agriculture, used to provide for, hopefully can continue to provide for in the future, is so huge. Because like I said, my grandparents lived 50 yards from my parents. So I had my grandparents at my disposal, right? Anytime I wanted. Like I said, I spent more of my time with my grandparents than I did with my parents at that early stage of life. And it's something that's really special to have all those things. And I'm just grateful to be able to report from here. This is a super special spot, which is the Brining Corrals in Little Valley. And hope you have a great day.